Greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Jim Bacon, publisher of the Bacon's Rebellion blog and contributing editor to the Jefferson Council. We are pleased to have as our guest today, Adam Andrzejewski, CEO and founder of Open the Books, a nonprofit group dedicated to transparency in government spending. The Jefferson Council has been privileged to work with Adam and his team as they have applied an unprecedented level of scrutiny to administrative spending at the University of Virginia, in particular the university's staffing of a vast diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucracy. Back in March, Open the Books released its findings. UVA employed 235 employees, including student interns, with a payroll of roughly $20 million. As college tuition soars, that revelation was an embarrassment to the UVA administration. Not surprisingly, UVA disputed the numbers, claiming that it had only 55 employees in DEI positions. But if it never explained its methodology and it never released its data. So I think Adam took a little umbrage at the denials and he went back to work, Opened the Books, dug deeper, and identified 100 more employees whose jobs include DEI functions. Before we kick this off and I turn this over, start asking questions to Adam, let me encourage you, the listeners, to submit your own questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will do our best to get to them towards as the webinar progresses. So Adam, why don't you start off by telling us how you got your numbers? Where does that figure of 235 employees and $20 million come from?
So it comes from the university itself, of course. We had filed a sunshine request with the university for their payroll. And this was important because, if I tell you something, Jim, you can doubt it. But when they produce it, it's got to be the truth. And so it is actually their university payrolls. And the first thing we did is we sorted it by keywords and we released all of our findings. It's a database on its face, 235 employees that underneath the DEI rubric, they're responsible for driving that ideology into every corner of the university. And so when you sum the salaries, it comes to about $15 million. When you add on the cost of benefits, it comes to some $20 million, which is equivalent. It's a big number. It's equivalent to, on in-state tuition, about 1,000 students paying in-state tuition payments at the university. I just want to take a step back for a second. This morning, we looked at total employee headcount at UVA, and it's a stunning number. It's more than 23,000 employees at the school. We took a look at the student enrollment in the graduate school and also in the undergraduate school. Again, right from the university website, and there's 23,721 students enrolled in both the graduate and undergraduate programs. So that's particularly stunning. When we talk about university payroll bloat, you've got all these employees dedicated to pushing a radical ideology, a neo-Marxist socialist ideology of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion on campus. But then just overall globally, you've got nearly a 1-to-1 ratio on the headcount of employees versus total student population. It's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and the bureaucracy is just, it continues to grow. There's continued pressure. I mean, in the Board of Visitors meeting coming up this end of this week, they're talking about how they want to increase the number of student advisors. And apparently they don't have enough and students are losing their way. Anyway, so let's get back to the DEI numbers, though, which is kind of the most visible aspect, this bureaucratic bloat. There's also transparency issues involved here, and UVA has just not been very, very forthcoming. I mean, how have they backed up their claim of only 55 employees? What evidence did they present to justify their number?
Yeah, they've never presented any evidence, which I don't know if you get to make a claim if you don't release your underlying database. Jim, that's exactly what we did. When we came out with 235 employees, we released the sorted database, which was their database, their numbers. So let's talk about that. Name of the employee, the department where they worked, their title, their compensation. We transparency transparently released all of that. And we knew we didn't find them all. These were only the ones in dedicated roles pushing the ideology, again, into every facet and corner of the university. And so, we made, at the time, we made reference to, for instance, the Daily Cavalier, the student newspaper, when the administration rolled out their number of 55, we wanted to respond to their news article, which disparaged our findings, with a letter to the editor. They wouldn't publish it, but we made note of the fact that right on the masthead of the student newspaper is a DEI director, somebody in charge of DEI at the Daily Cavalier. That person's not in the payroll, and they weren't counted in our numbers. And so when we went back to do a deep dive, and the Jefferson Council was very, very helpful on this. You had put together, you had pre-researched all the DEI websites at the university and provided us those hyperlinks. And we put a researcher on it, and we screenshot everything because these things tend to disappear. But we came up with another 100 plus employees at the university where this time where it wasn't their primary role, but they were the leads, they were the Jedis, they were the directors, they were the fellows pushing the DEI again into every facet of the university. Now those extra 100 people, they're paid over $18 million. Okay, so you've got nearly $40 million at the University of Virginia behind the push. I'm not saying every dollar can be saved on that 40 million, but what I am saying is there's a lot of money stacked up behind this very pernicious push at Mr. Jefferson's university to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion into every facet of the school.
Yeah, Adam, one of the things that we found in our digging is that there have been a lot of new faculty appointees, and they are the faculty members themselves. They, whether they're in the art department or religion department or women, gender in whatever department, they are extremely woke in the sense that they adopt and perpetuate and justify the DEI ideology. There's dozens that we've seen. I just wondered, did you include any of those kind of woke faculty members in your count of DEI?
So we published this at City Journal. City Journal is the academic publication at Manhattan Institute. We took it there for a very important reason. Number one, the university, the Jim Ryan administration, they're dying on this number of 55, which you just cannot justify. And so we wanted intellectual backup here. We wanted backup from the academy on one of the leading think tanks in the entire world, and that's the Manhattan Institute. And so, their editorial process is very rigorous. We took our findings there, and again, we released the database, including the hyperlinks to the UVA websites where these folks appear with their roles, right? So you can see, that there's 20 people over at the medical school. There's 9 people, I believe, over at the architectural school. You can see on every single one of these what they do to push DEI into the university, into their department, and you can also see their day job. You could see the title. And so again, on a transparent basis, we've got nothing to hide. I think they need to answer the questions, and quite obviously, they refuse to do so.
Yeah, and there's let me suggest that as much work as you've done, it's not yet complete. I mean, I don't know if even Open the Books has the resources to do everything that warrants looking at, but DEI departments have supplementary budgets that, travel expenses and going to conferences and things like that. They dole out small amounts of money to different departments for like departmental level projects. So, I mean, that's funding that's in the system somewhere. But I think maybe the greatest impact of all of this, and maybe even bigger than the amount of money spent on the DEI bureaucracy itself, and that is the impact on productivity and lost time. You think about all the endless committee meetings and people just talking to one another and liaising and coordinating and doing all the stuff that bureaucrats do. The mandatory DEI training sessions that people are required to attend, the voluntary DEI activities like lunch box discussion groups and DEI reading groups. And then, of course, the mandatory DEI statements, which faculty members have to fill out every year in order to be considered for, I mean, any kind of, pay raises and promotions and then, of course, there's the people applying for jobs. They have to fill out DEI statements, and someone has to review them and appraise them and discuss them. So, I mean, it's just a massive amount of discussion that goes on. Just wondered if in your dive of looking at just the payroll and kind of visiting these people's websites, did you get at least a kind of a qualitative sense of all these kinds of hard to quantify costs?
Yeah, so I just want to answer this just globally, Jim. Here's what came to mind. Look, I'm Polish. I was born in 1969. I'm almost 55 years old. I remember Soviet communism, especially in Poland, where you had a government employee, you had a party minder next to every single public official, making sure that they stayed on the communist narrative. There was no strain from the narrative, with Soviet control. That's what you see here at UVA with diversity, equity, inclusion. You just went through the laundry list of how deeply this concept is embedded in the school. So I think now we need to cover, just how dangerous this is to a place like the University of Virginia. The University of Virginia should have a charge from Thomas Jefferson, author of, the Declaration of Independence, the watershed document that created a revolution, one of the most important documents in all of human history, that recognized that all men are created equal, that we have an equal opportunity to strive, based on merit. So DEI, this word equity, is the opposite of this. It's equal outcomes. It's not equal opportunity. In order to have equal outcomes, merit has to be racist. And underneath DEI at UVA, merit has to be racist. You are judged by the color of your skin, not by the content of your character. It is the exact opposite of the Jeffersonian principles that created this revolution that led to, by and large, on a state-sponsored basis, the end of human trafficking, the end of slavery, as codified into law for the first time right here in the United States, when the other co-founder of UVA, James Madison, wrote it into the United States Constitution. So UVA has this historic charge to be, on freedom and liberty, on the equality of all people, but they've gone in this very divisive other direction, which cuts and rips and shreds at Jeffersonian principles. And now we're showing just how deeply embedded this is in the university itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and just to elaborate a little bit, I mean, the impact on the stultifying of the intellectual inquiry at UVA is yet another kind of cost that's being imposed by this. Universities, of course, are supposed to be wide open to intellectual inquiry, but there are just certain areas you just can't go when it comes, particularly in the realm of kind of anything related to social justice. I mean, it's just absolute dogma, and people know where to keep their mouth shut. Just to move on, a couple of questions, just a couple more questions for you. Then I want to get to, we got a lot of questions from our listeners. You've used UVA as a launchpad for investigating DEI at other universities like Chapel Hill. Just wondered real quickly, what have you found at other universities, and how does UVA compare?
Well, first off, I just want to say the rubric and methodologies that we pioneered on this oversight investigation of DEI at UVA, this is now a model, and we're flipping that model over public universities, for instance, the top 10 public universities across the entire country. And so the first one out of the blocks was at North Carolina. And so by using the same rubric, the same methodology, 48 hours before the UNC system-wide board decided to end public funding of DEI at UNC, they didn't actually know what was at stake. And 48 hours before they made that decision in their board meeting publicly, we published our findings. So there were 700 employees at UNC on 16 campuses. They're paid $90 million total. Again, not every dime of that can be saved, but these are the people behind the push of DEI at UNC to push it everywhere.
Yeah. Last question is, how can listeners help you in your work of bringing transparency to government? Again, we have a website.
There's no easy conversations left in the country, and all of us need to raise our voice. We need to stand in stalwart defense of Jeffersonian principles. In large part, it's what makes America an exceptional country. And when I was on the turf for the Jefferson Council dinner, walking around campus, being immersed in actually what was going on the turf, it really steeled my spine for the difficult road ahead, because the enemies of Jeffersonian principles, the people that believe in the opposite of the foundational principles of the country, they've made the fight at UVA ground zero for their quest to go in an opposite direction. So we cannot lose this. We're coming up on the 250-year anniversary of the founding of this country, and 1776 to 2026. And so now's the time to take the stand, and we need to reverse the damage that's already been being done.
All right, thank you, Adam. We've got a number of questions from our listeners, and I want to get to them. In no particular order, just as I'm kind of absorbing them here. Do you have a sense of chronology? I mean, how many of these DEI employees, asks Dick, were in positions established before DEI policy was adopted? In other words, are they all new, or were they around before and some of them, their jobs just kind of got reconfigured? Do you have a sense of that?
So I have a sense of it. So I think it goes back to 2020, September of 2020, actually September 11th of 2020, no less. I remember the date, of course, when the Board of Visitors, they passed the $1 billion DEI push at UVA. Incredibly, and people have forgotten about this over the course of the past 4 years, they did short, medium, and long-term plans for $1 billion to institute DEI everywhere at the university, from $150 million in race-based scholarships and $650 million to endow those type of efforts, and $150 million to increase race-based hiring, and all this stuff is delineated very accurately in our writings and oversight reports. So at that point, and then there's audits, there's DEI audits that have to be done on an annual basis, consistent with this $1 billion push at UVA. And so we assume, and this is why it's also mystifying, that the university's trying to tap down, run away from, say there's only 55, it's no big deal, there's not a lot of money in place. Because it's patently false. Like, they have $1 billion plan to push it everywhere, and we assume after that plan was instituted that the employee headcounts on DEI had to go up. So in the databases that we've disclosed, we do have the hire dates, I believe, of the employees that are involved, and you could take a look at that. It's not definitive. They could have started out as a secretary and got their education and then rose into positions of leadership. So it's not definitive, but it does give you a sense of if people are being brought in from the outside for these roles. And we really haven't taken a look at that timeline to answer your question in full. But in these databases, you can start to get a sense of what it's all about, given the context of a September 2020 push on DEI at UVA.
Multiple readers have kind of asked this question, and that is, as you look at maybe someone whose DEI is not actually in their title, or they're not actually working for a department of DEI, what kind of process of evaluation did you use to determine that, in fact, they are working? What criteria do you use to classify them as DEI?
Right. So in the first round of oversight on the 235, which included 82 students, they didn't get counted. Those type of people did not get counted because on that 235, you had to have a keyword in your job title, so very direct to be included in the database, or you had to work for a department at the university dedicated to the push. Now, we actually quantified the entire landscape so policymakers would have a full and complete picture about direct spending into DEI and the other state and federally mandated programs on, for instance, civil rights, equal rights, things like that have been in place for a long time. So people would understand the entire complex, and then policymakers could choose what's important and what's waste. Okay, that's very important nowadays to have a picture of the entire concept, and here's why. You see in states like Texas that have outlawed public funding of DEI as juxtaposed against the Biden administration executive order, for example, of pushing biological men into women's sports and enforcing that executive order through the traditional Title IX civil rights agencies on campus. So you have a melding of Title IX civil rights, historic civil rights offices on a college campus and this DEI push. So you need to know the entire landscape. Our reporting was very accurate and quantified all of that. So that was the first report. The second report on the extra 100, these are people that have an ancillary role. They've been appointed to push DEI into their apartments, whether it's to interview graduate students that want to come to the university, whether it's to interview potential hires, whether it's to audit their department on DEI rubric. These are the folks that are tip of the spear on the concept.
Tom asks, he alludes to the tens of millions of dollars being spent across UNC, of course, more in Virginia, and God knows how much elsewhere. What impact do these people, and you kind of address this a little bit, maybe you can delve in a little bit more, have on kind of pushing a particular ideology, and what are the key precepts of that ideology, and what impact are they having? I mean, we refer to students are going to UVA and other schools, and they're being indoctrinated. So as opposed to they're learning, being told what to think as opposed to how to think. What is the kind of the nexus between DEI and that whole phenomenon?
Yeah, I think, I've covered a little bit of this here. So at whether it's UNC or UVA, I do believe that the whole concept on the campuses and across the country, and even in corporate America now, DEI has become toxic. And that's why you see administrations like the Jim Ryan administration trying to run away from it publicly, or tap it down, or minimize it. Because the American people, left, right, center, people understand that it's opposite to America's founding principles, that it's divisive and it's hard to have progress and move our nation forward under this kind of a rubric. And so, look, whether it's at UVA or UNC, I don't know how you advance over the last couple of years underneath the DEI regimes in place if you're not on the narrative, if you're not on that background bandwagon. I don't know how you advance as a student. I don't know how you advance as an employee.
Got another technical question. This from Nick again. And by way of background, the University of Virginia has two main divisions. One is the healthcare system, and the other is the academic division. Did you get a sense of is the DEI bureaucracy is permeated through both divisions, and do you get a sense of which division is it more alive and well and active?
Yeah, we didn't look at the medical division. Now, we did obviously look at the medical school as a part of the UVA complex, but we did not. We have not looked at that separate unit over there with the university healthcare system.
Okay. All right. Um, let's see. Okay, here's an interesting question. Is there any way to calculate the cost of losing faculty who will not apply here due to the DEI climate and say the mandatory DEI statements? And Michael refers to a highly regarded economist who was interested in coming here but chose not to leave. I guess maybe this is another cost. You by of the DEI apparatus as you narrow the scope of acceptable, permissible ideologies at UVA, and you lose good people.
Yeah, you lose good people on the academic side. And look, you put thoughts in students' heads that make it tougher for them to advance in their own lives. And I want to give you an example of this. So it's no secret my last name's Andrzejewski. It's difficult to pronounce, it's difficult to spell. You know, we were basically the only Polish family in a German immigrant rural town when I grew up. If somebody would have told me that my hometown was structurally against Polish people, that would have hurt my advancement. It would have given me a reason to fail. When my brother and I went into business together, I mean, he had graduated from Harvard Law School. He didn't want to be a lawyer. We wanted to publish hometown telephone directories all across the United States. We broke down the big yellow pages into small hometown telephone books, and they were the most popular anything ever produced, any project ever produced in the history of those communities. And over a 10-year period, we did 200 towns in 3 states, and you know, we could never get a lender to give us a line of credit for years. I think, you know, after 5 years, when we were a $6 million business, we finally got, you know, a $50,000 line of credit. We couldn't get a lender to loan to us. And if somebody would have told us it was because of a structural problem on, you know, against Polish people, like maybe we wouldn't have had the sheer force of will to pull our business idea through. So it's pernicious to the students. It affects obviously who's teaching in the academy. It's just got so many ramifications that, you know, this DEI initiative, it's got to be pulled out by the roots.
And we still have more questions, and I can't get into them all. Maybe a logical one to conclude with is Olivia asked, what are the keywords and what are the departments associated with DEI, and where can I find your report that lists them?
So at City Journal is the latest reporting. We're up to a head count of 350 in some capacity employees underneath the DEI rubric, the DEI umbrella. So you can see that at City Journal, it's a very simple title, DEI at UVA. And then on our Substack page, openthebooks.substack.com, you can see all of our reporting on DEI at UVA from the initial through when the university, you know, we answered the university when they said there was only 55, you know, full and complete dissection of their argument right there at Substack. So you've got three important pieces, 2 on our Substack plus 1 at City Journal. And then, you know, all of this has gotten a lot of national press. You know, even Elon Musk tweeted out, you know, some of the press, for example, on the Washington Examiner, when they highlighted and amplified our findings, he tweeted it out. So it's gotten attention from all across the country. On our Substack, you can also see our findings at University of North Carolina. And I have to say, the conversation in North Carolina, you know, when we showed what was at stake, when the board then issued their directive to end public funding there, the conversation, for example, in the state capitol in Raleigh on the biggest TV stations, the NBC affiliate, the Charter One affiliate, Spectrum One, long form discussions and debates on the subject back and forth between people who think DEI is a good idea and those that don't. And our findings, there was a very respectful conversation of our findings, and and they were properly presented, and they didn't try to skew them one way or another. They properly presented what we found across the 16 campuses at UNC. And that stands in stark contrast to the Jim Ryan administration at UVA, which has tried to mislead stakeholders using university press organs like UVA Today and the student newspaper to try to influence stakeholders through their own controlled media. And we've asked, and they won't let us publish. And so, it's a stark contrast between the conversation at the University of Virginia and the conversation on public policy, important conversations over at the University of North Carolina.
Adam, thanks so much. We appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. Keep up the great work and open the books, and we at the Jefferson Council will do the same. So thanks again.
Thank you.